Welcome to Girlish Gurus. I'm Joy.
And I'm Susan. And we're here to have discussions about topics on many subjects that we hope are informative, uplifting, and fun.
So, let's get started.
Let's.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Girlish Gurus. And today, we have a very special guest, my very own sister, Mickey, who's been on before. And Susan's not going to be with us today. She's on assignment, taking care of some other things. And I felt like this would be an excellent opportunity to discuss something that Susan and I have actually talked about a fair amount over the course of episodes we've discussed in the past. But it's something that you and I also have a pretty close connection on, and that is aging parents and some of the special issues that you have to deal with when you have a parent who
challenges
trying to manage challenges. Thank you. And that's why you're here. So specifically, we've had a lot of stuff going on with our dad. He's in his mid-80s. And he is now at that age where he is dealing with a lot of health issues. He is just
failing.
His memory's failing.
He's
getting older, and he's just having a lot of difficulty when he's outside of his comfort zone managing himself. So I thought we would take this opportunity to talk about this issue because women who are 45 and older, that's something I have talked about a lot with my friends who are in that age group, that we are all finding ourselves in a situation where we're having to manage older parents and parents who are aging. And it's difficult for a lot of reasons. You find yourself, especially for you, who is the middle of a sandwich. So you've got young children still. They're not young children.
I thought you were going to say because I'm aging too.
No, well, we'll talk about that later. But no, you have kids who are young adults.
Right, and
so
they have challenges.
Right, and you're still managing them.
Right.
But then there's you, and then there's dad. And so you're stuck in the middle where there's a lot going on there. So I think the best way to kind of start this is to talk a little bit about our most recent issue with dad and sort of tell that story, not only as a cautionary tale, but also as a little bit of background in discussing what's going on here. So.
Right, and some ideas about what you might face when you're faced with this aging
Same
parents
situation.
as well. Yeah.
Right.
So there's things that I think people don't think about, and sometimes you have to be creative with your ideas about how to manage them.
Right.
Because they don't want to lose control
Or autonomy, right?
Right. And so you just have to be creative.
And this was a huge learning curve for me. There have been a couple situations in the past where I've had to step in and manage things a little bit, but not in the same way. This was much more extreme.
There's been some significant ones, though, but
well,
he was younger, but not that much, but still challenging and still unique.
Right. But this has been next level, really.
Right. Yeah,
so
this was yes, next level.
Difficult.
Yep.
All right. So you were the one who got the first set of phone calls. So you want to start it off?
Yeah. So, it was actually like a Saturday morning, I think. And I get a phone call from Dad's minister who, when I answer, he's like, "Miss Mickey, you need to call the sheriff. Call the sheriff right now." And I'm like, "Why do I need to call the sheriff?" And he said, "Your dad, he's hooked up with this woman and she's bad news. And I've been trying to talk him out of it for the last, 20, 30 minutes. He's like, and I got to go. But she is abusing him." And I'm like, okay. So because of the nature of what I have to deal with when I live at home, I always have to try to remain calm because others can't. And so I was like, okay, when you say he's being abused, what does that mean? I said, is she physically abusing him? And he's like, no, but, she's got a record and she's manipulating him and he's talking silly stuff like he's going to marry her. And I'm like, okay. well, can you give me a little more? And he just told me that she was younger and, he was just in a hurry and he wanted to get out of there.
Right.
So I didn't get the entire story or details until after I called the sheriff. Because I was like, okay, Dad, we know Dad. He kind of has a habit of collecting people. Mm-hmm. And he likes to lead people to Jesus. Dad is a very devout Christian. And he likes to lead people to Jesus. And when he sees an opportunity, he takes it. And so the woman, we found out later, she definitely saw an opportunity. And she took it. And it was just like the perfect storm. So I have my own theories about why Dad is such a poor decision maker. But anyhow. No, there's a good solid, theory there. So,
I think we both have probably the same theory.
Oh,
likely.
Yeah. So, well, I have experience with autism. Both my kids, their challenges is that they're high functioning autism, and Dad fits that profile pretty closely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if he was evaluated, he would come out as being
there
autistic.
is the issue. He's never actually been evaluated or diagnosed and will not consent to that.
No.
Without question.
Right. And,
nobody knew back then.
Nobody knew.
But this adds another level to the story.
Right.
Because this is an issue that we have to deal with without actually dealing with it.
Yeah, because over the years, I've gently tried to approach this because, most people that I talk to that are autistic, they're happy that they know. And it helps them better navigate society because it's a social disorder, right? And lots of anxiety. Mm-hmm. But it helps them navigate better. So they like knowing so that they understand that they're different. They're not broken. They're different. Mm-hmm. So every now and then, Dad will actually ask me questions about the boys, and he'll say, is that why they do this? And it's like, yes. And he's like, I always wondered. So anyhow, Dad, these challenges, and then the fact that he collects people and tries to lead them to Jesus, that's his socializing.
Right.
If we want to put it that way. So that's his socializing, and the church is very important, and
that's his community.
That's his community. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always worried if there's something going on that might cause him to switch churches. So the sheriff goes out on a well check. So they ended up going out a second time the next day because Dad didn't show up at church. Dad never not shows up to church. Right?
Right.
So unless there's something wrong.
Really wrong. Right.
He doesn't feel well or something else is wrong.
Right.
So generally, if he doesn't feel well, he doesn't go to church. And that really scared me.
Right.
Because the first call from the minister did not really scare me too badly. I was just like, oh, here we go again. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it's not going to turn into what happened 4 years earlier. Mm-hmm. But let's just try to not have it happen that way. But the next day, he's like, he didn't show up to church. I'm going to go looking for him. So the short story is on that Saturday. Oh, no. The reason it happened on Saturday, forgive me for trying to get my schedule or my timeline in order.
That's all right.
So Friday night. So this person was a relative of someone he knew.
Okay, let's stop right here for a second. First of all, you're being very polite. It's important to explain about her character so people understand what's going on here. I think maybe, by the way, we've been talking about it already, you'll start getting the idea. But this is a person who's 43, just got out of, I don't know, was it 14 months in prison?
At least 14 months.
Yes.
I thought it was 18, but it
might have been longer.
It doesn't matter.
Right. Well, she had a criminal history that included property crimes, included prostitution, which this is prostitution that is in service of a drug habit.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
And so we don't judge.
Right.
And we are sensitive to people who have issues with addiction.
Right.
But this is a person who, for 20 years, has been engaging in criminal activity in order to serve a drug habit.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are sensitive. It's like when I talk to the boys, when they were younger, if they were being bullied by somebody who was also autistic, it's like, okay, we're sensitive to that. We're going to be kind to them, but you are my children, and, we're going to handle this. We can't say, oh, they're autistic too, so we're going to be nice to the bully, right? Because that's not going to be healthy for you, right? So we have to recognize what the boundary is.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about here is we're sensitive to people who are addicted and to addiction. It's a very hard thing, and we as a society do not support our people that have addictions. We don't have good programs.
Right.
And they just fall between the cracks. But we're talking about an addict who is preying on our Father.
Right.
An elderly man. Even if he wasn't our father, he's an elderly man.
Right, exactly. And so we've got to resolve the situation.
Right. After I talked to the minister, he had said that this person had taken him up to a seedy hotel, not far from you, actually.
Right.
And I was like, that's very ironic. They took his car and went up to the seedy hotel, and he checked them in with his credit card.
Right. And so what has happened here leading up to that Friday night,
right,
Dad is moving her in to his home.
Because Saturday, after the minister's call, the next call that I received, like within probably 30 minutes, it was 2 hours later, I pick up the phone, and I knew it was Dad, and he says, "Did you call the law?" And he's just like getting very emotional. Right. Later, I found out even more, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is because it was under the idea that his car needed fixing. And so I know a mechanic.
Right.
So that's why they came up here. She talked him into getting a hotel room, Dad. Mm-hmm. And then the mechanic came around and picked up the car. And they spent the night in the hotel. But the mechanic came by, picked up the car. What was really going on, she told Dad later that he was going to take the car and part it out. You know?
Well, wait a second. Let's back up a little bit. Mm-hmm. All right. So they were in the seedy hotel room.
Right. Oh, yes.
Dad falls asleep.
Right.
She hires an Uber, goes the next town over.
Right.
Gets another hotel room.
Yep. And I think she used his credit card definitely for the hotel room. We know.
We do know that, yes.
Right. And I think the Uber might have been on it too.
I don't know about the Uber, but I know about the hotel room for sure.
Okay.
So while there, she conducted
her business, whatever it was.
And then she finds her way back to the hotel room where Dad's at.
Right.
And then.
Right. Oh.
Dad wakes up.
No, she doesn't actually go back to the hotel room. She goes to the mechanic's trailer.
Okay.
And Dad wakes up in the morning.
And she's not there.
And she's not there. And so he's supposed to be, Saturday morning, he's supposed to be at the church they're supposed to do visitation or something. And they've got a missionary minister that has come in that they're all going to go around doing visitation. And he's not shown up.
He wakes up in that hotel room and he was by himself.
And he was by himself. And so he did have his cell phone at that time. And so the minister called him and said, "Hey, where are you at?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know." And I'm like, "He didn't know where he was?" And he's like, "No, he seemed disoriented." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh boy, did she slip him a Mickey? I mean, and yeah.
Well,
that's
the long really and short of it is he's telling the minister, "I'm here in this hotel room."
Right. And he's like, "Well, what
But
hotel?"
My car is gone.
Right.
And so is she.
And so is she. So, well, I don't know that the minister had the story till he got up there. So
Minister gets up there.
The minister.
And gets Dad.
Well, it was the minister, the song leader, and the missionary.
Really?
Yes. The minister had said later, I was like, oh, well, this is not a good scene, that we're having, that we're supposed to be doing this function, and instead we're having to deal with this thing. So the minister, the song leader, and the missionary go into a bar.
We're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to cut a lot of this down.
I know,
but I'm gonna have to put the extended clips, the extended version somewhere because it's so funny.
So, but it does. It sounds like your joke, right? So they get up there, And sure enough, his car's gone. At some point, he's like, what hotel are you in? And he's like, well, I don't know. He's like, go outside and there will be a sign. Mm-hmm. So the minister said, where's your car? And he said, I don't know where the car is. And he said, give me your phone. So he starts going through his dad's phone and he starts calling the numbers that are on the phone because she has started to commandeer the phone to do her business. This is when I started pulling phone records, right? So he starts going down the list and calling, and people are like, nope, don't know anything about that. And I'm like, I can't believe you think that people would tell you, but clearly somebody did, because one of the numbers, they're like, oh yeah, that ain't me, but you might want to go look over at this other guy on the other side of the road, down a bit. And he's like, what's his name? And he's like, it's so-and-so. And he's like, okay. So the minister, the song leader, and the missionary, and now dad are all in.
The badger.
Are all in the minister's car. Mm-hmm. And off they go to this other place. And they pull up. And the minister starts to recognize the place because he's driven the church bus in there to pick people up for church. And he's like, as we pull in, there's Brother Dwight's car, and out comes this man, and then she follows him out, and then there's a young man about 21 years old who he recognizes because he had picked him up on the church bus.
All right, so he knows the third person coming out of the...
Right.
Okay.
So the minister gets in Dad's car and says, get in, Dwight. Well, she gets in too. And all the way down to Dad's house, he's ministering and lecturing. He's like, listen, no judgment, but hey, this is wrong, and blah, 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 and you really need some help. And there are several missions that can help you, and so on and so forth. And she was getting more irate, saying she didn't have a problem. And Dad was like, I'm going to marry her. And I'm going to lead her to Jesus. And she's going to come to church with me. And then. So what he had told me is like, she's trying to manipulate him into letting her move into his place. And he's going to marry her. That was the first call. Right. And so she clearly was preying upon him.
Well, so that's where I come in. I get the call from you. And then a very short time thereafter, I get a call from Dad himself, who says to me, Joy, it's your dad. I just want to call you and let you know I'm getting married. And I said, what has caused you to make this decision? Well, it was almost like Sling Blade. I like the way she talks and she likes the way I talk.
Did he say that?
Something similar. Oh, she and I, we spent some time together. I said, how long have you known this person? He said, maybe a month. Mm-hmm. And she and I have spent some time together, and she likes me and I like her, and I think we're going to get married.
She's agreed to marry me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Dad, do you think that's the best choice? Do you think that's the best decision? Mm-hmm. And at that point, the person in question said to Dad, Dwight, you need to hang up the phone because we need to call around and find some business where I can rent a trailer to get my things to bring them to your house.
Oh, you heard her say that.
Yes. Yeah. And so he said, Joy, I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. And so at that point I knew, okay, nothing good is going on here. Mm-hmm. And then between you and I, we started calling the police.
Right.
And so ultimately, by this time, he'd spent the night with the irate person.
Right.
And she had gone in and cracked open a beer and started smoking cigarettes.
Right.
And Dad wasn't going to have that.
Right.
That hit up against his line.
Right.
And so he didn't show up for church. Minister comes and gets him. And Dad starts telling him, I think I've made a mistake.
Right.
And so at that point, Dad says, okay, you guys can go have law enforcement get her out.
Right. Right.
So then we all get on the phone with law enforcement.
Right.
And law enforcement heads over there and tells her, you need to 86 the premises.
Right.
and she proceeds to try to take all the power tools.
Right.
Her way out the door.
Yeah, and they allowed her to take stuff that was presumably hers. They said we weren't going to let her rob him on the way out the door, but at one point she picked up a jigsaw. and the police officer was like, seriously,
You brought that with you?
You brought that with you, did you? And she's like, fine. And she puts it down. But she took what we thought was Dad's television that we had bought him. And
Turns out, no, it was actually her television.
It was actually her television. Can you imagine? Because they dropped her. So they called us and said we dropped her at the county line.
Right. By this time, the minister has possession of Dad.
Right. And
we are conspiring to get him a plane ticket
right.
to send him to see our third sister.
Right.
In Indiana.
Right. Because we know this from other family situations that when there's this kind of situation going on, those people will come back around and come back around and come back around. So you have to get those people out of town for an extended period of time.
Yes.
Unfortunately for our sister.
Right. Which we apologize for that still.
Yeah. She really stepped up to the plate.
She really stepped up, yes,
yeah,
for sure.
And she took him on for 3 weeks. Can you imagine? I know you took him on for 2 weeks. Oh, it was a week and a half?
Yes.
Okay. So twice as long, right? And here.
Just
yeah.
Just, yes.
Yeah. And so that was huge.
We owe her huge.
Well, and our niece especially.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You know, our youngest niece, our sister's youngest daughter, who he was actually quite cruel to, but to our sister as well. But you and I worked it. So the minister arrives at his house because I told him, I said, will you help us get him out of town? You know.
It was just a bad situation.
It was a bad situation.
And we were all trying to manage a bad situation.
Yeah.
That's what was happening.
And it was like, I don't care. Just get him out of there. And whatever he doesn't have.
We'll figure it out on
that
the
he
other
needs,
end. Yeah.
we'll figure it out on the other end.
Right.
In this whole process, what all of us do not understand, well, I knew about this, but I didn't think about it. He had, in December, at the last minute at open enrollment, he had signed up for an Advantage Medicare plan, which Advantage Medicare plan, for all of you people who have elderly family members, parents, don't let them do that if they can afford it, because you cannot leave your state.
Right.
You cannot, I don't know how far it extends, if it's out of the county, you can't leave the county, but he must be able to leave the county because his doctor is in a separate county. So.
The long and short of it is, this means he doesn't have insurance when he gets to Indiana.
When he gets to Indiana.
You're right.
Which we find out much later, but after it's too late and he's been to the doctor. So he's there for 3 weeks. We fly him up, right? And our sister picks him up at the airport. And so meanwhile, I'm packing my bag to come down here to be your moral support, right?
Turned out to be a whole lot more than that.
Oh. I am so glad that I came down because the law had said, she's going to come back around. We need to do something with him. And it's like, it's already in the works.
Right.
And then, so get in the car, come down here. And I arrived because the sheriff also said, you need to change the locks on the doors.
Right. Well, so a little bit of a backstory here.
It was.
I have been doing my best to manage Dad. I take him to doctor's appointments, things like that. But the mobile home that he lives in now, he bought himself against my advice and against my counsel. And I was in that mobile home one time, and he hasn't been living in it for very long.
This is another note to listeners, which is if your elderly parent meets you at the door,
won't let you come inside,
or won't let you come.
He actually would meet me at the bottom of the stairs,
right? And
I wouldn't even get anywhere near the door,
right. So he would come out, he'd be ready to go, and we were always, I don't know about you, but we were always under the impression he was just like happy to be going out for dinner and a cash drop, so
pretty much,
and so we never thought about it. And it turns out, so when your elderly parent will not let you near their house,
something's going on.
You need to suddenly have to go to the bathroom in a really big way so that you can go in and get a look-see because something's wrong. Something is horribly wrong. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, it was 6 years.
Yeah.
He's been living in that place.
Yeah.
And I had
Seems
been
like
in it.
longer.
I had been in it. I was in it when he moved into it. And I was in it, I think, one other time.
Right.
But
I
only...
was in it once, I think, right after he moved in.
I was only in it up to, like, right inside the front door.
Yeah.
So I was never...
No, I had a better look.
No, I didn't.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
So, of course, I don't think anything of it. I mean, at the time when he was moving in, it seemed kind of disheveled, but it didn't look...
Well, it was very dad.
Right, it was very dad.
I mean,
That's
he
how
uses
he
his-
lived,
he-
yes.
He uses his home as a storage, an additional storage trailer.
Basically, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and tools and books and I mean, but a lot of tools because he was always worried about them being stolen.
Right.
So, and that was before he built his shed,
that's a whole
which
other
houses
story.
the tractor and the boat.
Well, I wouldn't call that a boat, but
That's
okay.
what he calls it.
So here we are. Dad's in Indiana,
Yeah.
and it's time to go change the locks on the doors. And that is when the other shoe really dropped. I mean, it did. It was bad.
When we say you really need to check on your elderly, you really, really do. Yeah, it was, ugh. So
It was bad. I think part of it was due to the fact that the interloper had moved in and they had just been to Walmart and gotten some groceries that were
Yes.
left on the floor in the kitchen.
Right.
And then she was invited to leave the property and
Right.
Dad was on his way to Indiana.
Right.
And so that was part of it.
Right. But
Also, she was camped out on the sofa
Right.
in the living room
Right.
with her detritus about her.
Yeah, right. So the difficulty is that he was, what we found primarily had happened all before
Yes.
she came in. So
Mostly,
she
yes.
added to it, but it was,
It was just, I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah. I mean,
It was hoarding and
Well,
extreme
that's-
filth, in my
that's-
opinion.
That's how it was because we arrive at the house and the locksmith, remember
Right.
the young kid, and so I go inside and you start looking around the property on the outside and I go on the inside
And I knew immediately.
and I step inside the door and I'm like, okay, just try not to get sick. And I thought that I had seen the worst. I hadn't. I started down the hall towards the bedrooms, but I was terrified that she was in there because the door was closed and the locks had not been changed. And so I was like, what if she's in there? And this is not I am not trained in this. And I am not going to go down there and have some crazy woman, coming after me with God knows what, and it's like a power saw. Because maybe she came back in the middle of the night and was squatting. So I think I knocked on the door, but, I didn't go in. It was going to take me some time to get up the nerve. And so I walked back down the hallway, through the living room, back through the living room, and into the kitchen. And I'm like, I think I will keep going and to the other end of the trailer and inspect that first and just try to get my... what is it? What do they say when you're trying to build up, the courage to look at something gross? So I was trying to build up my courage. So I go down there and I'm like, by the time I get down there, my camera's running and I'm taking pictures and I'm like, oh no,
Yeah, it
the
was pretty
very
bad.
thing that we're trying to protect him from, and this is the thing, still today, he thinks that we are trying to put him in a home, right? What he doesn't realize is we don't want him in a home.
No, of course not.
And my brain is like, my brain is like, you know what? We're going to work it out. We're going to figure it out. Just right now, just take pictures and give yourself some space. So I'm like talking to you, I'm talking to myself, and I'm trying to pick up trash. And I'm like, but before I said, what are you doing? Just get out of this place. And just give yourself time and regroup, and we'll talk to Joy and we'll talk to everybody and see what we should do. I was already formulating a plan, but I reach down and I pick up a Walmart bag and I go to look in it. I picked it up and it's right in front of me over my beautiful tennis shoes. And I look in and it's 2 containers of chicken livers that never made it to the refrigerator. And it wouldn't have mattered because things in the refrigerator looked like the chicken livers. Warm and gross. And I'm like, what's that noise? Where's the water running? And then I realize it's not. The livers, because they were warm, in the heat, they had started to expand and push the juice out from underneath the lid.
Well, they pushed off the lid, yeah.
It pushed off the lid, and I didn't realize that there was a hole in the bag, and so chicken liver blood was pouring down onto my shoes, and that's when I was like, yep, gonna throw up, gotta get out of here. And so I remember coming to the door and saying to you, Joy, because you were a former ADA, and I said, what do you call the people that come to crime scenes to clean up crimes? And you said, oh, they're called
bioremediation
specialists. And when I asked you that question, your face, I'm sure, looked like mine. It drained of color, and also all the emotions just kind of poured in. And I said, we're looking at doing that. So you're like, come on, we're going to have to go home and make dinner. And I said, it doesn't matter because I'm sick. I don't feel good. And so you were like, well, luckily the trash bags have a good smell. And I said, well, we've got to do something with the trash. And you're like, we're going to take it to the dump. And I'm like, in my car, which is really good at hauling stuff, but I never in a million years. So what we did is we took the rest of the garbage bags and we lined the back, and we lined all up and down, and we double bagged the garbage. And the whole time we're trying not to be sick. So we put all the garbage that we could get, that you picked up outside and that I got from the inside, and we put them in the back of the van. And then we rolled down the windows. So maybe it was cold. It was cold. That's what it was.
Well, January, yeah.
Yeah. And we rolled down the windows, and we had a very cold ride home because you're like, I don't even want to try to find the dump here and see if it's open.
No, we drove straight to my county.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know my county.
Landfill,
yeah. Right. So we did that.
Let's just go.
So you get out of the car. I'm driving this time because you drove down. And then on the way back, I drove, and we pull up, and you get out of the car and go, and you start grabbing, you're like, just stay put. And I think you felt sorry for me. You start grabbing the trash bags with these gloves on your hands and running them over, and the dump is filled with people. And you're back and forth between the car with these gloves on, and it's like, oh, what is she doing? So
gotta be done.
Yeah,
you do what you have to do.
Well, we got together with our spouses, and our spouses were very supportive. I went back home, and my spouse, Kurt, took a week off work. What I ended up arranging for was a bioremediation. You arranged
biohazard cleanup. Yep.
Remember the purple Count truck?
Count Juncula.
Count Juncula. So we've got some great companies that assisted us. The bioremediation company, they're very sensitive. They handled it, because it's hard, and there's a lot of emotion and everything else. And I can't believe it, but they rated his property or his trailer, the inside, as like a level 2 hoarder. And you never have a clue that there's actually ratings and whatever. And so we hired Count Juncula, and then I hired again another just house cleaning service, and ended up hiring another one. So we come down here on a Sunday, and Monday morning, Kurt and I go down. I think you were already there.
Yeah, I'd already been there in that interim week.
With the bio,
right.
Preparing. You and Ron went down and took a box of screws and
screw down all the boards on the deck. Yeah.
Right. So we had all had a conversation. You guys were going down to, try to work on the deck to get that safe. There were all these things that we were going to do, but you met with the bioremediation people in case they needed something. But, so they went in, and over 2 days they
cleaned it out.
The bin
was just
well, and I, so before Count Juncula came, you and I took our turns when we were there, throwing things in. I'm like, oh, yep, it's going in, and so, $15,000 later.
Yeah, it was a enormously expensive endeavor.
It was,
we could talk about the financial aspect of Dad
another time.
But
it was so it is better to need to go to the bathroom at your parents' house, because they can't say no, and because otherwise, you might not have the money to do that. So it was a very hard.
Oh, it was extremely hard. It was extremely hard.
Our husbands put a lot of work into it, and we put a lot of work into it, and and you can't do this. That's the other thing is she can't do this alone.
That's right.
You need your siblings, or you need your family, and friends to be there to help.
Right. Because it was emotionally a very difficult time.
Yeah.
All right. So here's where we're at.
Okay.
We have addressed the situation with the interloper.
Right.
While we're addressing that, we come in and realize there's a much bigger situation underlying.
I would not call it bigger. I would say it was
well, okay, equally bad.
It was
equally bad.
Yeah.
So a big bad situation that had been brewing for a while that I was not aware of. Mm-hmm. And both of us now in this moment are looking at each other like, okay, we've got to deal with this. Okay, Dad's in Indiana. So I do think this is an excellent stopping point.
Right.
And we'll go into part 2 for the next podcast episode.
Okay.
But just as a cautionary tale, I think you're right. If you have a parent who is acting cagey about you coming into their property, or if you see that there's questionable people hanging around, look after your elderly parents. Look after your elderly folks, because they could likely be in trouble.
Right.
And whatever you can do to help them out, that's good karma. It just is.
Yep.
So,
right.
All right, let's wind this up, and we will leave all of our listeners hanging for the next episode, where we talk about some of the creative solutions and some of the things that we did to put Dad in as safe a possible situation as we could, and try to move forward from there. So thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the next one. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Girlish Gurus. We hope you'll join us next time for another fun and interesting topic. And please be sure to check the notes for information and links that were included in this discussion today.
Also, don't forget you can find us on our social media platforms, starting with Instagram, Facebook, and now, including YouTube. You can find us by searching Girlish Gurus. And please remember to give this episode a good review and share it with your girlfriends, because the more interaction we get with our podcast episodes, the more episodes we can post. Finally, you can find us on our website, girlishgurus.com.
Thanks again.
See you next time.
Bye.